This watch brand was hyped up by YouTubers, a bit like me, I guess. But yeah, this mysterious and little-known AliExpress watch brand basically passed me by when it first came onto the scene. It kind of arrived at a time where I really couldn't fit it in, but I've been determined to try new brands on AliExpress, to try and discover the best brands on there, and this brand was all over YouTube at one point, so I figured I've got to try it just to make any recommendations that I make bit more informed and well-rounded. Now, I did buy this one with my own money on AliExpress. I'll leave a link to it in the video description. But thanks to AliExpress, who did give me a discount on this one. Yeah, I'm excited to try Escapement Time for the first time. Bit of a bizarre brand name, but yeah, let's give it a whirl. I guess I've heard worse. Now, this retails for about £40 on AliExpress, which isn't really much, and it's a quartz watch too, but one that looked like it had a little bit of a gimmick, I guess. Somewhat sweeping seconds hand, which I have seen before, obviously, but it's not very common. Now, the box, it looks pretty trashy, I'm going to be honest. Looks like some sort of 1990s thing, but hopefully what awaits me inside is better. We have a pouch here that looks like it's from a folk tale. Looks like it's from Robin Hood or something. This emerald green. It actually looks much more green in the flesh. Now, this particular watch I purchased because it looked at least semi-original. And here it is. Wow, it certainly has a very shiny case. Now, I can't actually see a model name for this. I've just had a check on the listing. But this particular watch is clearly at least heavily inspired by some of the vintage Seiko models, the King Seiko models, and that has what appears to be a very similar case shape, and also an extreme glossy finish. My goodness, that is super high shine. It still feels like steel. It is definitely cold to the touch. Still feels relatively weighty as well. So unlike some of the other super glossy cheap watches I've looked at recently, which were almost universally some other type of rubbish alloy, this actually looks nice. It's shiny in a good way. And then it's got a small section of brushing there in the lugs, and you can tell it looks like the Seiko watches because it's got those wide shoulders, it's got those Dauphine hands, and of course it has that quartz movement. And I can see there it's ticking along. In here is supposedly a Seiko VH31. I remember I did look at another watch that had a ticking standard quartz like this, but it's certainly not the most common. I'm going to be totally frank with you. Even though certain elements of the watch here do look pretty good, like the hands look fairly good, the markers look really good, and then you've got that wafer thin and quite stylish case, really. I'm not sure this is a watch I would ever buy or wear regularly if I wasn't a YouTuber, because the dial's just like really flat. It's kind of like a paper dial, but doesn't really have a great deal of texture, just looks kind of plain and in a way underwhelming, especially combined with that cursive text. While the Escapement Time branding isn't the worst in the world, and it is better than quite a few of the other AliExpress brands, really dislike the super over-the-top font there. One thing I will say is they've at least kept the text to a bare minimum, so it's quite minimalist. Also has an unusual crystal, which, I mean, the crystal itself looks quite nice. This is supposedly a sapphire crystal, and a relatively clear one at that. As you can see, doesn't have a huge amount of reflections. It's actually very clear. So any of these higher end, like really expensive watch brands that have sapphire with massive legibility problems due to it being cloudy, they've really got no excuse. This watch is currently selling for 40 quid on AliExpress, and in fact there's a voucher at the time of recording, at least, for a further 5 quid off. If they can do it, anyone can do it. Now, what I found is that the cheaper you go on the spectrum, the more chance the brand is lying about materials. So hopefully that's not the case here. For comparison's sake, we have this Erebus Ascent, which I already know is sapphire, as you can see by the strong rating there. And we're looking for a similar score with this Escapement Time. And yes, it does. So that is a piece of sapphire. Very impressive, the clarity on that one. Really nice, stylish case. As you can imagine, at this sort of price, it's a bottom of the barrel strap in most regards. The lining in particular feels very cheap there, but it does at least have quick release spring bars, which is something, and even a screw back. Apparently you get 50 meters of water resistance, which is all right. It does feel like it'll at least handle some major splashes. It says just stainless steel, so I guess there's a chance it's a different type of steel. Could be 304 steel, this, which apparently is cheaper for watchmaking purposes. And that's what certain brands like Vostok tend to use. This does look a little like that, potentially. Now, according to the listing, this one also has a screw-down crown, really? Yes, really. So yeah, maybe it will hit that 50-meter rating. Now, the Seiko design language is hard to ignore, isn't it, with those hands and markers. It's a good looking watch for the most part though, and I ordered this particular one because this is the one that all the YouTubers were recommending, although they do seem to have since released some other ones. And in all honesty, if it was, you know, me buying for my own personal tastes only, probably would have gone with the silver one here. That's the only one in the collection that doesn't look super flat. Oh, maybe the blue as well. Yeah, the blue's got a bit of a sunburst to it. So yeah, those two are probably a little bit more interesting to me. The markers are probably the best bit of detailing, I'd say there. But let's test the sizing first. I think it says on the listing 40 millimeters, which is just a hair under, about 39.8 this one. Rather flat lug profile, 46 millimeters. Not a huge amount of curvature. Interested to see how that sits on the wrist. Very thin. That's 9.5 with that slightly raised crystal. Without it, it's a little bit thinner. Somewhere around 9 millimeters, I'd guess. And there's a look at it on my 6.25 inch wrist. My arm isn't made for 40 mil watches. This is definitely a little bit too big considering the style of the watch, at least for my arm. I think for the average wrist though, this wouldn't be problematic at all. Pretty good for them, what I gotta say. It's a lot better than the vast majority of 40 or 50 pound watches on Amazon. As you will know if you watch my Amazon's Choice video. Yeah, most of them watches suck. This one definitely doesn't. Really is wafer thin there. And there's a look at the profile. It is a little bit pancake-like. It is quite flat. Probably won't be such an issue if you've got a bigger wrist. Some of this is just because it extends slightly past the edges of my wrist, as you can see. But I think for most arms, that's probably not a challenge. Strap feels okay. There's a little bit of a rough patch somewhere underneath here, but not bad overall. You know what this screams? This absolutely screams to me gift watch. Super safe design, a low price. It's got a thin profile, which, you know, loads of people who are new to watches love the thin watches. It's also quartz. This is exactly the sort of thing that I would gift to my dad or something. And you know what? Once I'm finished reviewing this watch or whatever, I may do something along those lines. As for the YouTubers hyping this watch, I kind of get what they were on about in some regards. If memory serves me correctly, lots of them were very hyped about like the movement and the case finishing here. And while I don't think the case finishing is extraordinary by any means, I do think it's quite interesting at least. You get a real glossy shine on this one. And also the branding does put a slight sour note on it for me. Kind of get what they were going for with the play on words, but the font is just unusual. I'll leave a link to it in the video description if you want to check it out either way, and you can have a look at some of the other colours too. Also, something I've noticed is this inner lug section. So you can see here inside the lugs, it has that super high shine bezel on top of, not much rougher, but certainly a rougher inner portion there. That lower portion, I think, is still steel. And I wanted to check this because a previous watch brand basically tried to conceal that they weren't using stainless steel by hiding the rough patches in this gap between the lugs, but it doesn't seem to quite be the case. There's actually a little bit of a stain there. I think it's probably still stainless steel. I think this one will actually photo quite well.